Hi, my name is Allison Moeller, and I'm a member of the Author Selection Committee. It's my delight to introduce to you all today Marie-Helene Bertino and her third novel, Beautyland. Marie, will you come up here and stand with me if you don't mind? Bertino is an acclaimed and prolific author whose writings explore the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Honors for her novels and short stories include the Iowa Short Fiction Award, the O. Henry Prize, and the Pushcart Prize. Beautyland earned rave reviews from the New York Times, the LA Times, and the Boston Globe. She is currently a writer in residence at Yale University. Bertino has a myriad of interests and talents in addition to writing. Music is one. She has sung in a band and written many music reviews, for which she once attended 26 rock shows in 4 days. Bertino says you can learn a lot about someone from print interviews and also by knowing them. I hope you all get a chance today to meet and better know this extraordinary woman. Beautyland tells the story of Adina, who was born in 1977 to a single mother at the instant the Space Shuttle Voyager 1 launched. Was that just a coincidence? Adina would say no. Rather, she believes herself to be an alien sent to research Earth's suitability for her kind. And the transmission she receives from her superiors on an ancient fax machine suggests that she just might be otherworldly. Adina's observations about humankind are both insightful and dumbfounded. She watches Johnny Carson making fun of Carl Sagan on TV and reports that Sagan is a polarizing astronomer who wears natty turtleneck blazer combos and has been denied Harvard tenure for being too Hollywood. Yes, we know about him and his turtlenecks, her superiors reply wearily. The fax machine spits out cryptic messages until one day it doesn't. Has she been abandoned? As Adina grows to adulthood and experiences humankind's joys and tragedies, she still remains an outsider, and her search for a home becomes more urgent. Her quest reveals what it means to be human in all its heartbreaking and beautiful ways. Please join me today in welcoming Marie-Helene Bertino.
Thank you so much, Allison. That was really, really lovely. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you from this vantage point. I'm so grateful to the Pasadena Literary Alliance for inviting me here today. Thank you to the selection committee for choosing Beautyland. This is an honor that I am still processing, and I'm so happy to be here with such amazing writers who inspire me as well. These speeches are giving me much needed inspiration today. And considering that Beautyland is about trying to connect to every human being on Earth, it's a particular thrill to be with you today. And I can't wait to find out this evening which of us gets crowned Miss Pasadena. I think Essie, or no, Rita. No, maybe Rachel. I can't wait. Good luck, ladies. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathering during a time of tremendous loss and rebuilding here. Several years ago, my mom lost her home in a fire, my childhood home. And with it, all of our possessions, paintings, photographs, prom dresses, etc. And I can't imagine mourning a home alongside the profound collective loss of neighborhoods and all of the important connective tissues they sustained. I'd never imagined that book-tipsy writers and readers could help to revitalize a tender community, but I hope that those of us like me who are guests here in this city move through Los Angeles with friendliness, intention, and gratitude. It's an honor to be here, and I hope that we do some good. Thank you. I've always loved Los Angeles, and I have cherished the fact that it has consistently been semi-lukewarm about me. What I thought I would do today is tell you a little bit about myself, then the book, and then finish by briefly going through a few questions I've been getting about Beautyland, and then we'll open up to your questions. For those of you who haven't yet read it, Beautyland is a cradle-to-grave story about a woman named Adina Giorno who believes she is extraterrestrial. She is born to a single mom in Philadelphia in 1977, and after a distressing event at age 4, she becomes what she calls activated, and she's aware that she has been sent to Earth to report on human beings in transmissions she sends back to her people, who she calls her superiors, via a fax machine her mom pulls from the trash. Adina documents what can be referred to as the profound mundane. In her adolescence and teens, this means that she reports on what is at hand, what is around her. Her mom's dating life, her best friend, why popcorn is the official food of movies, even though it's like the loudest sound on earth. Why humans love to throw fried eggs on things, on like anything, even pizza. But as she accrues losses in her life, in her 20s and 30s, her notes begin to delve into the very marrow and purpose of why we're here. Eventually, in middle age, Adina experiences a different kind of loss, that of privacy, as her notes unexpectedly reach a larger audience and strangers begin to weigh in on the question, is Adina really an extraterrestrial, or is she merely a troubled, lonely woman? Vibe change. So like Adina, I was born in Northeast Philadelphia. I was raised by my mom, Helene, who I believe is watching at this very moment. Hi, Mom. Who taught me that nothing is trash that can be turned into something else, like a planter or a shelf, or even in one notable example, a lily pad pond. My mother's mother is from the Basque region of France, and my dad was Italian. I have always wanted to be a writer, and I wrote my first book when I was 11. It was called The Dream Crystal, and it was about a woman with amnesia who accesses a fairyland named Neshaminy, named for my local mall. She is enlisted by garden fairies to save their dying world. The text was overly dramatic, derivative, and I should have paid royalties to Lloyd Alexander's Black Cauldron series. But I have never been more proud of anything in my life. It was a spiral-bound copybook of handwritten pages and accompanying illustrations. It was a sacred object to me. So you know how sometimes when things are going really well, something just clicks and coincidences start to occur? Well, you won't believe this, but that very year, the Huntington Valley Library in Philadelphia announced a Write and Illustrate Your Own Book contest to area grade schoolers. I just about lost my 12-year-old mind. I had to enter. But the submission required a typed manuscript, and though at this time some people had computers in their homes, we certainly did not. So my mom bought us a word processor, a bulky, cumbersome office machine that weighed 3 tons and practically took up our entire kitchen table, but was able to accomplish the most sophisticated form of communication I could imagine. It could produce a book. Every day before school, I typed a little of my book into the word processor until I had a manuscript of 103 typed pages. And I submitted it to the library in this holy and sacred manila envelope and prayed for weeks that my novel would be better than all the other novels the other 12-year-olds had written over 2 years of their summer vacations. And I waited. And I waited. It was my first experience of waiting to hear if a work would be accepted, and it was torture. Finally, I received a phone call on our wall-hanging landline with the long curly cord. It was a librarian named Nancy Hensler from the Huntington Valley Library, and she told me that I had won. Are you surprised by that? Wow. The dream crystal was bound and put into the library. So my mom has told me not to say that Beautyland is my fourth book because technically it is my fifth book. While I was typing that book, by the way, I wasn't worried about her, who worked in human resources and didn't have a lot of time for fun. And I wasn't worried about my dad, who I saw at that time in weekly visits that could be brutal and confusing. And I wasn't worried about how much I missed my brothers who left our house as soon as they could. And I wasn't even worried about my future, something that kept me up almost every night and tormented my sleep with nightmares. I didn't know how the world worked, and unlike my classmates, it didn't seem like there'd really be anyone to show me. Nancy Hensler had no idea what kind of home she was calling into that day, or that that phone call would be the best I have ever received and would sustain me through so many hard times to come. While I was writing this, I texted my mom to ask how she was able to afford that word processor, and she texted back, all caps, layaway. And then she texted, on time, Sears, Roebuck and Company. And then a few minutes later, she texted, I paid off the amount in a specific time frame with no interest. It was the Sears on the boulevard. And I said, how on earth do you remember that? And she texted, because it was so important. Heart emoji, champagne glasses emoji, dancing lady emoji, meme of Snoopy dancing. They're clapping for you, Mom. My dream was to go to NYU for writing, and I got in, but there was no way we could afford it. So instead, I went to where we could afford, and honestly, it was a miracle I was able to go to college at all. I knew I would have to figure out how to be a writer without a lot of support, so eventually I decided to just go where I knew writers were, and I moved to New York City. The rituals and routines of New Yorkers have always seemed odd and fascinated me. And I created a desktop on my folder called Notes on Human Beings. And it contained things like, why do the words thaw and dethaw mean the same thing? And why can't anyone invent an ironing board that doesn't sound like a war? The roses that bloom at the mobile station, the ripples in my hair after sleeping in a braid. The idea for Beautyland was sparked over 14 years ago when I used these notes to write a short story about an alien reporting on the strange habits I was noticing every day. But after it was published in my first collection, Safe as Houses, that alien refused to let me go. There was something more she wanted to say. And my folder kept growing. I added notes all through my 30s while I worked every single job in New York City. I worked as a retail clerk for Anthropologie, a biographer of people who are, why are you laughing at Anthropologie? It's wonderful, at least 2 of your writers bought their shoes from Anthropologie today. That's a fun fact. I worked as a biographer of people who were living with traumatic brain injury, a data entry clerk whose business I never understood, but that I now think was on the severed floor of Lumen Industries. A receptionist for a boss who was so concerned about people microwaving salmon that he wallpapered the tiny kitchenette with photos of salmon with giant crosses over them. I took notes, I walked the city, I fell in love, I adopted a dog. I said goodbye to friends who gave up on the city and moved home. One of my favorite things to document were the phrases some of my workout instructors would yell during class at Crunch Gym in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. And I kept a running list of motivational phrases they would scream at us while we were lunging, like, almost village is close to nowhere land, and that's not your karmic fish to fry, and I care about your butt. And eventually, there were so many notes that a character began to glimmer around the edges, someone who was at a distance from the world, so could see it with this offbeat, clear perspective. And I wondered, could I write a whole novel about her? Like I'd done with my first collection and my first two novels, I wrote Beautyland by hand at first. Then, every morning before work, I typed a little at a time into a Word document. Like the dream crystal, whenever I'm writing, I can leave the troubles of the everyday aside. But to hold down a whole novel, the alien would have to have a name, a job, a neighborhood. By that point, I had been told directly and indirectly, offhandedly by strangers, and sometimes by people who love me, that my experience growing up was not the stuff of literature. Northeast Philly is an urban sprawl with strip malls and mini golf courses and Acmes and auto zones, places where we do a lot of our business in our lives, but we usually don't see in novels. I wanted to look at these places until they became beautiful. My instruction to myself was, see if you can connect AutoZone to the stars. So I decided to set the novel in what some might consider an unlikely place, but I knew was just as likely as anything else when viewed from the cosmic perspective of 300,000 light years away. My alien would live in Northeast Philadelphia, and she would be Italian American. Italian Americans occupy a complicated place in the American creative imagination. And I'd get made fun of a lot for being Italian American, as if I was some mafioso, when really I was just this awkward, crafty, buck-toothed strango. I'd never read a story that featured an Italian that wasn't in some way linked to the mob. And I had never read any story that featured an Italian American woman, because this was before the movie Moonstruck. I feared that writing about my Italian Americanness, because of the stereotypes and because I didn't see how it could be relatable, would not be considered literature. But I found in my career and in my life that when I am scared of something, that fear usually gives me my to-do list. So instead of avoiding it, I decided I'm going to turn toward it and really lean into it as hard as I can. And I wrote on the early draft of Beautyland, "Be Italian." So the alien was born, or landed, depending on your perspective, in Philadelphia. But it took a long time to give her a name. My friend, Adina Talvi Goodman, was a nonfiction writer and a lover of pies. In her kitchen, she had a framed painting of a quote, "If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe." This was said by Carl Sagan, an astronomer whose work became crucial to me as I researched. In 2018, Adina passed away from cancer at age 31. And I feel like giving the alien her name was kind of, if you'll forgive me, written in the stars. So through Adina the alien's eyes, I returned to my childhood haunts and was able to see them like a newcomer. Photomat booths, hip-hop music, and the workout instructor became Yolanda Kay, one of Beautyland's surprise gifts, an improbable woman who shows up at Adina's darkest time. But perhaps the biggest surprise of the book was Adina's mother. I'd never read a rendering of a single mom that wasn't in some way a stereotype of selfishness, and I wanted to render one who reminded me of my own. So Adina's mom is a complex, caring, hardworking woman who changes and grows in surprising ways. After she has an upsetting dating experience, she decides to build a garden. And I loved the idea that this garden would be growing in the background throughout all the years of the novel. So, Adina is 100% human and 100% other. Now, I know those percentages don't add up. But I'm always surprised when readers or awards givers assume that any woman who feels extra to the terrain must be labeled in any way not realistic. I grew up going to a church where we were taught to pray to someone who was simultaneously all human and all divine. And so the infrastructure for Beautyland and speculative fiction was built out in me since Catholic school. All to say, I've never really understood when people think fiction is a lie. Whatever else I'm doing, I promise you, I'm trying to tell the truth as hard as I can. I grew up watching my grandmother type letters to our ancestors in the Basque region of France. She wrote to them in that language using her old typewriter, a bulky, cumbersome office machine that weighed 3 tons and took up an entire tabletop, but was able to accomplish the most sophisticated form of communication I could imagine, relating the events of our everyday to our family an ocean away. So I grew up with an understanding that family was something who lived very, very far away, spoke a different language, and who you connected to through writing. Being an alien means you feel at a distance from humans. Adina encounters profound loneliness, shame, a feeling that is shared by every human on Earth. There are 5 coming out scenes in the book. 2 when Adina's friends come out to her, and 3 when she tries to tell people her real identity. And each time she receives a different response, some heartening, some not. These 5 scenes are meant to echo what it is to try to tell someone who you really are, and they reflect my own experience of coming out as bisexual to my family and friends in my 40s. So you might understand by this point why I gave Adina a fax machine. A bulky, cumbersome office machine that weighs 3 tons but is able to accomplish the most sophisticated form of communication I can imagine. It connects Adina to her superiors, her family, and eventually to a world of readers. Because being specific and doubling down on her identity led to her connecting to such a broad swath of people I never could have imagined. And now, a year and a few months after publication, I've been amazed and humbled by letters and emails from people from all different walks of life who can relate to my dear, beautiful newcomer friend. Before I take your questions or ask you to yell at me that I've gotten everything wrong about life on Earth, I'd like to briefly move through a few FAQs, frequently asked questions about Beautyland, that I've received over the past year and a half. Number 1, is this book a memoir about your childhood as an alien? Yes. Number 2, Adina has misophonia. Do you have misophonia? Yes. Misophonia, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's an extreme aversion to certain sounds. So hearing people eat used to send me into a rage, though I've worked on it. I still, though, can't listen to someone eating a bagel next to me in a quiet room. Number 3, is Adina neurodivergent? Yes, but she wouldn't have been diagnosed in her lifetime, and nor would contemporary understanding have caught up to her. So I would never actually offer an official diagnosis at the risk of fostering too easy metaphors. I've received many emails from other neurodiverse folks and folks who inhabit bodies of difference who relate to Adina, and for that, I am so grateful. Number 4, what's up with the little prince in the book? Well, The Little Prince is stitched throughout the novel like a yellow thread, and that book contains my favorite dedication and my favorite ending, which requires the reader's participation. Depending on what you believe about that book, the rose either lives or is eaten. And at different points in my life, I have been like, that rose totally gets eaten. And at other points in my life, I've been like, no, the rose totally makes it. If you have finished Beautyland, you might understand how this relates to that novel. If you've gotten to the ending, you know what I mean. Number 5, yeah, about that ending. What's up with the ending of Beautyland? What happens? Why did you do this to us? And there will be no spoilers, I promise. But to answer this, I'd like to talk about another totally non-controversial ending, the series finale of The Sopranos. So what the ending of The Sopranos and Beautyland have in common is that, to me, neither of them are ambiguous. Shot by shot, it is very clear what happens at the end of Sopranos. And even if it wasn't, which it is, the entire season leading up to the moment dropped hints about that ending that were about as subtle as a lightning strike. Characters would literally say things to Tony Soprano like, "You never know, Tony, at the end it's just silence and dust. Comes out of nowhere, just blackness. You could be eating in a restaurant with your family, a popular 70s tune on the radio, like something from the Steve Miller Band, or Santana, or a group that's made up from former members of both of those groups, and bam, blackness." I think the ending of Beautyland is similarly clear. Number 6, do you believe in aliens? Totally easy, yes. Number 7, what a relief. So we're not alone in the universe? No, but I do wonder why we're so concerned about extraterrestrials and why we always assume they'll be violent. In the movie E.T., for example, he was a botanist. He just wanted to collect plants. Number 8, do you believe in humans? Oof, that's a harder question. Number 9, I know an Adina in my life. What can I do for them? If you know a kid who, like Adina, feels in exile at home, and I'm particularly thinking about kids who inhabit bodies of difference, LGBTQ kids, kids of color, kids who come from at-risk communities, or who are learning the world with disabilities, one simple thing you can do is get them books. Get them books. Books cross barriers, and books can be snuck into homes like the ones I'm talking about. But along with those books, get them blank copybooks and a set of markers so they can write their own books where someone they are or love gets to be the protagonist. Books and writing are powerful forms of survival. And for me, and for a lot of us, they are ways to imagine ourselves into better circumstances. They are a way to escape, a way to get to the next moment. They are ways of saying, I refuse to be limited by these circumstances. And finally, what would you like readers to take away from this book? Allow me to answer this question with 2 seemingly unrelated anecdotes. First, there's a poet, Buck Downs, who used to go to New England to make grave rubbings. And of that practice, he said something that stayed with me. He said, making grave rubbings points to some practical geomancy in which the materials on the earth are always only waiting to be activated. And the other anecdote is, I remember during my honeymoon in France, my partner Ted and I went to a grocery store and we bought a few things for dinner, including a lemon. And when we went to check out, the man took our lemon and with the tips of his fingers rolled it on the table a couple times. He said what he was doing was activating the lemon. So if you've learned nothing else today, you know that before you use a lemon, you must activate it on the table. I have a hard time with these talks because I get in my head about them and I'm like, what inherent question am I answering? And it's essentially, why is this book important? Well, Beautyland is about how anything, any human, job, animal, building, year of your life, anything can become significant if you gift it with your attention. And believing that something will add up to meaning is a practice of faith. That is why I call Beautyland a faith-shaped book. So my answer to the question of what do you want readers to take away from Beautyland is, I want readers to activate, activate, activate. Thank you so much for having me, Pasadena. Have a lovely day. And may Carl Sagan bless you.
Thank you so much, Marie. Really, really interesting. And I have a list of questions that I get to ask, but you've answered almost all of them.
All right.
I will say, you answered them beautifully, and I will say that Little Prince is one of my favorites. One of the quotes, and I'll get it a little botched, but is, you are responsible for that which you have tamed. And I do believe that you've tamed our room.
I have.
So I think you're responsible for a whole lot of readers.
Oh, wow. I am now responsible for all of you.
Exactly.
I apologize in advance.
No, it was great. Just a couple of questions that we don't have a lot of time, but one is you haven't talked about the notion of whether Beautyland falls in the category of science fiction or whether it is straight literature or non-science fiction. And I wondered if you'd speak to that.
Well, I'm really happy that it's being read widely and that science fiction readers are embracing the book. But to me, the book is not science fiction. The book is literary fiction. And I have to confess, I do wonder why books like this are immediately compartmentalized into genre. This is a strong woman who perhaps focuses on small things throughout her life is not impossible. Her story is not impossible. A woman from Northeast Philadelphia, though it's highly unlikely, she's not impossible. And so nothing impossible happens in Beautyland, and so I don't think it qualifies as science fiction, though I would never argue with a reader who believes that it is.
There you go. So we can bring to it what we want or take from it.
Yeah, I say whatever you think it is, it is.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have a confession, and one of my questions was going to be in this vein, which is Adina's connection to her superiors via fax machine just kind of appalled me because I am personally fax phobic. And I wondered how you explained choosing fax machine as the method of connecting with those way far away and beyond. You kind of addressed it, but take a shot.
I think that the book is trying to make a point about who is considered unlikely and what kind of life is considered worthy of a novel, worthy of literature, worthy of the page. And so I baked in unlikely instances and objects into the novel itself to reflect that deeper meaning. A fax machine is a bulky, cumbersome, obsolete business machine. And I loved the idea that it could be capable of the most sophisticated form of communication I could imagine. Because unlikely and impossible things have happened in my life all the time. So why couldn't that be possible too?
So maybe your life is science fiction too.
Some days more than others.
There you go. Well, this has been a wonderful day. I'm so glad you spent this time with us. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.